On the following, amending the Town Code of Waukesha Ordinances 2-2-3B, the annual town meeting, and secondly, 2-4-1, the town board terms of office. This is resulting in a change in state law in 2011, in which the state changed statutorily the terms of office. In order to follow the state calendar, the town also needs to amend its ordinances. Is there a motion?
I'll move to accept the two resolutions.
I'll second.
Discussion?
It's a minor point, they're ordinances, and so there's a motion to approve the two ordinances. It's technicality, but I just want to make the minutes are right. I'm sure your clerk's putting them down correctly, but just so there's no confusion.
Any discussion? Any problem with taking them both at the same time?
Generally, we don't, but no, I think the minutes will be clear if you do it that way.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. B, direction to the town clerk that a request is made by more than two supervisors and/or the chair to attend a conference under the vendor engagement policy. This is a resulting under policy that was approved by the town board back in June of last year regarding the ability of two supervisors to get together and engage a town professional. The question is, there's several questions around it. Number one, do all of the supervisors have the opportunity to attend whichever vendor that there is being engaged? My position on that would be pretty simple. As long as we're spending taxpayer monies, all supervisors should have access to that individual.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I asked that this matter be put on the agenda after discussing the matter with the clerk. And so if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to at least lay the background of why I asked that it be put on the agenda.
Please.
And you, as a courtesy, and there was no objection from the other supervisors, allowed it to be placed on the agenda. You have a vendor policy, vendor engagement policy. There's a lot of confusion right now over the specifics of that policy, but I'm not here necessarily a specific use of that policy, and we can talk about that if we want, but that's not the reason I put it on the agenda for tonight. The reason I put it on the agenda tonight was very straightforward, and that was that the process appeared to be properly and appears to have been properly followed for initiation of the vendor engagement policy. One supervisor made the request, a second supervisor approved it, and normally that would be the end of it, I would assume. And that's not an editorial comment, that's all the policy talks about is one person and another person. What has happened, and the policy doesn't address, to the best of my knowledge, or from what I could see, and that's why the clerk and I are here for direction, is upon her sending out notice per the policy, that the policy had been initiated, she received a request from the town chairman first, and then another supervisor asking that they could also attend the conference. And she and I didn't know what to do with that request. Obviously, she knew immediately that if 3 people were going to attend, she had to give notice of a meeting because there would be a quorum, and we don't want to violate the open meetings law. And so she did that in anticipation of the meeting, but not knowing, because the policy is unclear as to what we're supposed to do. So we either have to rewrite the policy at some point to deal with that issue, or get some direction from the board as to what the clerk and I are supposed to do when that occurs. So we don't have a proposal for you because it's a policy decision regarding a policy, and we don't set policy. We're just bringing the issue to you and asking for some clarification. And Mr. Chairman, you've stated your opinion, and I appreciate that, but I wanted to give some background as to how we got here and how it got on the agenda and why it's on the agenda. I got all kinds of other questions about the policy, but that's more specifics about the specific use this time, and I think we'll be through that. But, you know, and then we may come back with other questions at a different time, but, you know, that's the issue for tonight. What is the clerk supposed to do when she receives a second, or a third, or a fourth request for someone to attend that conference? It's a pretty straightforward question, but I don't know the answer.
I'll weigh in on that. I believe and I'm not sure whether this was the clerk's decision or with your advice, but I believe that the scheduling of a special meeting was a proper thing to do.
If there are no other comments, Mr. Chairman, we're not gonna belabor it. You know, we'll assume that that's what we're supposed to do if we receive that request.
I would say that if in this case, I'm the supervisor who asked to engage vendor, and inviting a vendor to then participate in a public meeting is something that would be a prudent step for the clerk to do. And if that vendor then refuses to participate in a public meeting, then the vendor engagement policy would rule, and the two supervisors engaged in the authorization would be the two that would meet. We cannot force a vendor that does not want to have a discussion in a public venue to have a public discussion, and that doesn't mean that answers still don't need to be obtained from that vendor.
Well, I've read most of the town ordinances, and I don't see anywhere where two supervisors get together and hold a secret meeting
It's not
to
a
discuss
secret.
town policy. And well, certainly it is. It's a contractor for the town of Waukesha. It's a pretty big topic regarding whether or not we have a clean or an unclean audit for the town of Waukesha for 2012.
Well, wait, I have to interrupt. If we're going to talk about the specifics, that's fine, but we're gonna talk about the specifics correctly. The vendor in the vendor policy that's being proposed for use is not the former auditor. They don't fall under the policy. I'm the vendor. In all due respect, I'm the vendor that, and as a courtesy, someone else has been invited to that meeting. I have to state that because I've got it up here. Attorneys, regular staff, counsel, and board authorized special counsel, consultants under contract with the town of Waukesha, engineering and planning with regular staff personnel or the IT contractor. In all due respect, the former auditor doesn't fall under this policy.
Fair enough.
Okay, so that's the first thing. I don't know if the gentleman who, the two supervisors, I mean, I assume that in part is why they requested that I be there, because I'm the vendor that they're requesting. I'm the one who's under contract. And I don't really take issue with Supervisor Bansky when you make the statement that you can't force, those people are under contract. You probably could force any of us to come to a public meeting. I mean, in all due respect, if we didn't, we'd be fools. So I'm not saying that a public meeting is the right venue necessarily to get, as I read the policy, it's to try to get a quick answer without, but we set up a policy because we didn't want everybody calling any of the vendors at any time, so you set up a policy. Okay? But it's to get a quick answer generally, and so I just lay that as the groundwork. If you want to talk about the specifics of the institution of this policy in this instance for tomorrow, that's a whole different issue. I'm just trying to deal with, and I think Supervisor Bansky, he stated his opinion that, we should open it up, but if the vendor refuses, then they can still meet. That was his opinion, I'm just paraphrasing, and we're just trying to get guidance here. And I don't know that we're gonna vote on anything tonight. I don't know, you may direct that we rewrite the policy,
Well, I guess that brings up an even better point. If we're engaging a town vendor and the town's taxpayers are spending taxpayer money, why wouldn't all the supervisors have access to that meeting? Under what circumstances, where in the ordinances does it say that the town, a couple of town supervisors can get together and have a secret meeting that the rest of the supervisors, or taxpayers for that matter, don't have access to?
Well, first, it's not a meeting, because it's only two. This is a conference, and I don't want us to use the word meeting, because I don't want anyone to think that we're violating the open meeting law, okay? And you ask, where does it say that two can do it? That's what your policy says can occur. In fact, I don't know, correct me, gentlemen who know this better than I don't know that there's really two people that have to be at the conference. I believe it's just a second supervisor has to approve it.
That is
The
I would
conference
agree.
is just one person asking for permission to meet with a vendor. A second supervisor has to say, okay, I have no problem with you meeting, and then the clerk has to notify everybody that the request has been made and that someone has, for lack of better words, seconded the request. So that's what the policy is. Am I stating that correctly?
That is correct.
So there aren't two people who are meeting, theoretically it's one, and now, you know, others have asked and up to a quorum is asked, so the question is whether we schedule a special meeting or we don't.
I would agree, it's not a meeting until such time as that 3 or more supervisors choose to be involved. At this point, 3 or more supervisors have chose to be involved, it is in fact a meeting. If taxpayers are paying for your time, then not only the supervisors, but all these folks out here are entitled to witness that meeting.
So when you call and ask for advice on open records request to our attorney, are you, John, then posting a public meeting so that we can all come in because you were spending taxpayer money? When
Yeah.
you and Brian met with the town attorney for, I think it was 4.5, 5 hours discussing open records request earlier this year, were we publicly?
Well, hold on, when was that? What attorney did I meet with for 4.5 or 5 hours?
You met with Attorney DeLamore, it's on his bill.
I disagree.
I did not meet, take it back, I did not
I
meet
won't
with
take
him
it back,
for
Ryan.
four and a
It's
half,
on the
5
bill.
hours. Joe Bansky, I did not meet
Okay,
for
well, I
4
won't
and a
take it
half.
back.
May I speak, please?
Sure.
I did not meet with Attorney DeLamore for 4.5 or 5 hours to talk about any subject.
Look at his bill. It's on
Right.
the bills.
Nonetheless, Joe, if you'd like to attend any type of conversation between the town attorney and I, you're welcome to do so. I have nothing to hide. I'm curious what you're trying to hide by having a secret meeting with the auditor.
Nobody is having a secret meeting, John, stop trying to coin the phrase. You have lots of secret meetings by your words.
No,
So,
sir,
yes.
I am an open book. You can attend any conversation you choose to, Mr.
Gentlemen, please, the
Ansky.
issue before you is whether or not the clerk should notice a special meeting if 3 or more of you wish to participate under the engagement policy. We've heard from 3 of yourselves. I just wonder if any of the others have comments, and then please give direction to the clerk and I as to how you wish us to proceed.
Mr. Wolf, anything to add?
Yeah, I think it sort of defeats the purpose of having a special general meeting called when all we're trying to do is get information. It is gonna, and from the way I understand it, they are meeting with us for no charge.
That is correct, but.
So there's no cost to the taxpayer for us to meet with them.
Attorney Macy does have a cost.
Oh, yeah, okay, right. So I feel it would defeat the purpose. This ordinance was made last year so that us supervisors have a recourse to do some things that we feel is right, and that the cost is not gonna be that great. We can share the information, but I think it'll be easier to get information out of the meeting, not having everybody there and having it in public.
Now, how would it be easier when all the public could see it? It's all out in the open, automatic, no problem. No need to disseminate the information, no need to summarize it, everybody can be out in the open and see it.
And what happens when CLA doesn't want to do a public meeting?
I would suggest that if CLA doesn't want to do a public meeting, that's a big problem for CLA.
Again, please, CLA is not a part of this vendor policy because they don't fall under the category. If they appear at either a conference or a meeting, it's strictly at their, because they've agreed to do so. And so the question is, what should the clerk do? Should she write back and say, sorry, you can't come? Should she say, yeah, well, I'll schedule it as a special meeting? We just need some direction. We may not resolve it tonight. It may be that you want to think about it. I'm just saying, the issue that you're speaking about of the implementation of the policy for the engagement policy request for myself and Clifton Larson Allen is resolved as best as it can be at this moment. I still don't know if they're coming at 2 o'clock tomorrow by teleconference. They said they were going to review the questions and they would decide whether they're still voluntarily coming. Did I state that correctly, Supervisor Bansky? I mean, they've laid the ground rules. You requested they attend that meeting with me and yourself. They laid down some ground rules saying they'd like to see the questions in advance. I'm just paraphrasing to bring everybody up to speed if they're not up to speed. The questions were submitted. They have to decide if they're gonna answer those questions or any questions, whether they're gonna come or whether they're not gonna come. We're dealing with their general counsel now. So, I mean, this is all public record, we're not hiding anything. And we certainly are hopeful that they're going to come and answer the questions at 2 o'clock tomorrow by teleconference. They're not coming in person. We anticipate they're gonna read a question, they're gonna read an answer, they're gonna read a question. They're not taking any additional questions, just so everybody knows that, once they approve whatever list that they're going to take. Did I say that correctly? So the issue isn't tomorrow. The issue is in the future when this occurs. And we can bring it up when it occurs in the future. If it occurs again, we can bring it up again. So I don't want anyone to think that we've moved ahead with the issue for tomorrow. Now this is just a general statement of whether you want to change your policy, modify your policy, or clarify your policy. And right now, we have 2 who think not, or 1 who thinks not, 1 who thinks there could be a minor tweak saying that if the vendor has no objection, we'll have the meeting, and if the vendor has an objection, then the supervisor should still be able to meet. Did I state that correctly, Supervisor Bansky?
That is correct.
Okay, and we have 2 who think that when 3 or more want to be there, it should just be a public meeting.
Well, here's my question, Attorney Macy. Can 2 supervisors get together and decide to spend taxpayer money and keep the other 3 supervisors, or the taxpayers for that matter, out of that expenditure? As I read your policy, the simple answer to that is yes, they can expend $150. That's the policy as I have in front of me, and I'm reading just that the request would be limited to $150. So it's saying they can expend up to $150 if they follow this procedure without doing it in public. That's our policy. My question is, legally, can we do it? Is our policy legal? How do 2 supervisors spend money without the authorization of the entire board? The entire board is not authorizing that expenditure.
No, but can you set a policy such as this? My answer would be, I believe that you could, yes.
Okay, fair enough.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask?
Go ahead, Brian.
No, go ahead, you go first.
Attorney Macy, if I may ask, based on your familiarity with our ordinances and with state statutes, absent this policy, wouldn't it be fair to say that any supervisor could contact any approved vendor of the town of Waukesha, and that vendor, so again, absent this policy, if I called you, you would be billing the town because I called you and engaged you in work. Therefore, this policy actually acts as a restriction to any individual supervisor randomly calling and spending taxpayer money.
Yes.
Thank you.
May I, 2 things if I may. First of all, I'd like to respond secondly to Supervisor Bansky, but first of all, I might just pose a question to Supervisor Wolf. I think a few minutes ago you said the sole purpose of this was to be able to gain information. And my question to you, if that's the sole purpose is to gather information, why not let all of the board members participate and let the sun shine in?
Because when we made that ordinance, we made the ordinance so that two supervisors could gather information. If we didn't want to gather the information, we would have called a general meeting with Clifton Allen and set up a general meeting.
Point, just a quick point, it's a policy, not an ordinance.
Well, fine. And I guess my question, Supervisor Piansky, you mentioned, and I was opposed to this policy because I frankly thought at the time, and I haven't changed my mind, that it's simply an attempt to circumvent other members of the board. That said, you bring up the topic that this authorizes an expenditure of $150. That isn't going to buy a lot of anybody's time. One of my real concerns is the year before last, you went without board authorization and ran up a bill between $6,000 and $7,000 with a law firm in Milwaukee. So I kind of like the idea of at least being constrained to $150.
That doesn't even deserve a response or so.
It doesn't have a good one.
So, what's the pleasure of the board?
I would like more.
You would like what?
The floor.
Oh, please.
On this policy, personality can be a big issue with some of our contractors. It needs to be said here. I think we can move forward in a more effective and efficient manner by having a few supervisors do the legwork to gather the information and bring it back to the board. That being said, there's no action taken unless the entire board is present and knows of the information. This would result in just a better flow of the process. Virtually, when you have conflict between any one or two individuals on the board, I can see where vendors might have issue with that. This expedites the process and we get the work done.
What's the pleasure of the board?
I think the way the ordinance is written, it is, or the policy, I'm sorry. The way the policy is written, that we keep it that way, and that is just for gathering information and not to create a special meeting.
But the question, Larry, is when three or more supervisors choose to be part of that meeting, what is the pleasure of the board to do? What is the direction to the town attorney and to the clerk treasurer?
I think I answered that. We don't make a meeting, so they obviously aren't allowed because it creates a quorum.
Is that a motion?
Attorney Macy, if I understood you correctly, this was a discussion point, not, I mean, we don't have a policy, that we're amending or adjusting.
Well, that's a great question. It says discussion of possible action on the following, but I did ask the clerk to put the word direction to the town clerk. So it was not anticipated that you would actually be making a motion tonight. The direction of the majority, well, it's sort of 2, 2, and 1. So I don't know that we have good direction at the moment. 2 say schedule a meeting, 1 says schedule a meeting, but if there's an objection by the vendor, then they can proceed. And, 2 say the policy should be as it stands. The direction, if I were to summarize for the clerk, would be that if she gets a request for a quorum to be present, she would schedule the meeting, and if the vendor objects, then I guess the policy would stand, because 3 would say that they can meet without having a meeting. If I were to give, that's the only way I can summarize where we're at the moment, and I think that's the best we can do. If she gets a third request, she's gonna schedule a meeting and advise the vendor accordingly, and if the vendor objects, then we'll have to proceed, we'll have to decide how we wanna proceed. I personally, I gotta be frank with you, I don't know a vendor that's gonna stay a vendor very long if they refuse to come to a meeting when asked to come to a meeting by 3 of their bosses. Let's be frank here, you know, but we'll take each step as it comes along. We're gonna have a myriad of different situations arise, and we'll have to deal with them. We were just looking for some direction, and I think we got the direction. Madam Clerk, do you think we have some direction here?
Moving on.